Hi, it's Kim from the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Today we're going to put together the last strip for this block and then assemble the entire block. This is Sister's Choice, or as I'm calling it for this project, the Busy Block. Grab your drink, we'll be right back. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Hi! Now, we're working on this block for our Blue Star project. We have what I'm calling the plain block, and then we have the busy block, or the Sister's Choice block. And we're going to be alternating these kind of checkerboard style in this quilt. So we've already put together the strip that's in the middle, the 5-piece blue and white strip. We've put together the strip that goes here, and that's this. There's 2 of these here, so don't let it get confusing to you. Okay? And today we're working on the outermost strip. Let me get this so it's just a little easier to discern what we're talking about. We're talking about this strip right here. Now, it uses the same pieces, but this time we're looking at hooking together 5 separate blocks. We're going to start on both ends with the white block, then go to the half square triangles, and they're going to meet in the middle with the blue solid block. When you're going to put together these blocks, we're probably going to start with the ones on the outside and work in. And as you can see, this is the way they fit together, either here or here. It's the same. So it doesn't really matter. You're going to sew together the white strip and the blue strip with the long blue attaching to the white. And I am going to just quickly set up to do a few of those. I always like to double check and make sure I've got them going correctly. See, I'm already confused. Yes, it's this side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out 4 of these. In the previous shows, what I've done is I've put together at least 3 strips of each for you to see. Now, I think you understand at this point how they go together. So I'm just going to put together 2 for this particular segment. One to show you and then one to repeat it, because I do have some already finished that I started before we started today. And I want this to go really quickly because after we get the strip finished, then we're going to work towards getting them all together. And I want to spend as much time as we need on that. So here we go. We're going to start sewing. I've got my machine set up with the 1/4 inch foot. I have adjusted the stitch length, and I've set my needle so that it will drop right at that perfect 1/4 inch. So we're just going to start sewing. And on these, I typically don't use pins unless I have to let them sit, or if I'm doing it ahead of time, maybe I'll use some pins. Because they're so small, you can just adjust on the fly. The only thing you want to remember is you want to keep them lined up properly, and you want to make sure that that seam on that half square triangle does continue to lay in the direction that we've pressed it, and that would be towards the blue fabric. And for that reason, I put that half square triangle. I think it should be called a half triangle square. I never quite understood. I think that's how you make them. But I'm going to put that piece on top. So now I've got 4 done, just that quickly. Let me grab a pair of scissors to snip these apart. If you're doing yours, once you get that first one done as a sample, then you could just simply keep going. So there we go. There's that. We've got 4 of those. I'm going to give it a light little finger press just to help us as we're putting these together. Okay. And 4. And I've got 2 others that I had already finished. Now, what goes in the middle? The blue block goes in the middle, and the blue block is going to go over that half square triangle, just like that. So I'm going to set it there. We're going to sew it, flip it around and sew it from the side with the half square triangle so we can see that seam and make sure that it stays in the right place. And for this one, we're going to have to really watch it because we're sewing in a direction that's not compatible to this. That's the one on the top. And this is, again, I know I've probably said this so many times you're sick of it, but this is one of the reasons why I like to have that sample that I can look at, whether it's a paper drawing like ours, whoops, or whether it's an actual sewn piece like this that I'm referring to. Because when you sit and you start sewing these, it's really, really easy to get confused and sew them on the wrong side. And instead of having a long linear shape, you end up with L shape because you've sewn them on the wrong side or they're facing the wrong direction. Okay, what do we have here? We have 3, I think. Let's stop there. Okay, so we have 3. Now, they match, and I'm going to take these 2 that I already had made, and I'm going to sew them here. And again, these are going to be ones that we need to watch because that seam is going in the other direction, given the way we're sewing. There's 1. Now, that one's down there. It's not quite this way. No, it's a different way. So let's see what we have. I have all of that way. What is this one? Nope, that's this way as well. So we're going to have to put this together. So the simplest way to do it is just to sew it in place like this. So that's what we're going to do. You could put them together in batches. You could sew them together individually. I'm going to let that be your choice and what works for you. Okay, so there's, what did we do? We got this one wrong. This one's right. Let's finish that up real quick. I think those ones that I had pre-sewn were all for the bottom section. And as I said, those are not interchangeable. Whoa, what happened there? It did not sew. There's a problem with the bobbin. It doesn't look like it wound just properly in that spot. Sorry, a little technical problem there. My needle thread was also twisted. Okay, let's sew that again real quick. Okay, clearly I've got something wrong with my machine, so we're going to take a little bit of break. I'll get this together. Okay, we're back, and I don't know what happened there. I had a bit of a bird's nest on the bottom of my fabric, and then it stopped sewing. And a lot of times when that happens, it's either because you've started sewing before you have fabric, so the thread grabs a hold of each other and gets confused, and it just creates that bird's nest underneath the fabric. Or you've got a problem in the way it was threaded. I think that this might have been a little tension problem that came up, or a little problem with the thread and the bobbin not being wound just quite smoothly enough. Either way, I took the bobbin out. I checked to make sure there were no stray threads underneath in the bobbin area. I trimmed off the bobbin and put it back in properly, and then I took the thread out completely and re-threaded the machine, and that seemed to fix it just fine. And I was able to sew that seam on, and so now we have this piece. Now I think given that all we've done here, I think you get how that's done, and that's pretty clear. The only caveat is that when you're sewing, let me see how to explain this. When you're sewing this piece, it does not equate to this piece. You can flip this entire piece with this entire piece, but you can't flip these two pairs. So that may mean that it makes more sense to sew these together, either to sew these three together and then add the two on the outside, or sew these two, then add this one, then add this one, then add this one. If you're looking for speed, that last one may be the way to go, because when you're sewing, they're all going to be consistent. Now, we've got that. Let's hop along to putting the block together. Let me tidy up a little bit here. And we're going to remove this for right now. And all these stray pieces. And let's get down to just what we need for this. I've got a set of these, and I'm going to lay those out here and ensure that they're all the same. Give me just a second to do that. I just pressed these a moment ago, so I know that in that regard they're good to go. And then these are the ones we're working on. So we have the outside strip, this next strip, the center strip, another one of these, which is this way. And it does get confusing if you turn them the wrong way. But once you work on it a little while, I think it'll get better. Okay, and there. So there's our 5 strips, and they're all lined up so they match our drawing, they match our sample. And what we're going to do is we're going to hook them together. Now, honestly, you could do this any way you wanted to. You could sew these two, you could sew these two and then add this one. You could sew from the outside out. It really doesn't matter. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. But what is important is the technique, because you want all these seams and all these color changes to be very sharp and very consistent. So however you chose to do it, it's fine. What I'm going to do is sew the middle strips to the center piece first. So I'm going to have one of these right here. And it's actually this strip and this strip that I'm sewing together. So what I've done is I've taken these 2 pieces that I'm going to start with. And what we're going to do first is we're going to match up these seams. Let me take this out and show you that our goal here is to match this up like this. so that it makes that perfect match right at that 1/4 inch seam area. Now, what I prefer is to be able to pin this right on the seam. The problem with that is I'm using this foot that has the bar to keep track of the outside of the fabric so that the stitch is right in the 1/4 inch. So I can't really put the pin right on it. But what I am doing is putting it down somewhere between a quarter of an inch and a 1/2 inch right below that. And when I'm sewing, I'm going to take special note to make sure that those seams are lined up. And I've done that to 3 pieces. That's going to make us 3 blocks when we sew these together. And let's see how quickly they can go together. Now, you can pin at the top. You don't have to. We just want to make sure that the top of both fabrics come together. If you have a situation where either the blue or the white, either piece of fabric, is longer than the other piece. Okay. So the important thing here is we want to make sure that these seams match up kind of in a checkerboard pattern when we open them up and look at them. And the way I'd like to do that is to stick a pin right there where those seams are going to come together. But I can't do that because the foot I'm using has that bar that keeps the edge of the fabric right at a 1/4 inch away from the seam. So I'm going to locate my pin somewhere between a 1/4 and a 1/2 inch away from the seam. And what I'll be doing is pulling this out as we go through the seam and then keeping that one in just a little bit longer. And that should work pretty well for us. We'll just need to sew slowly and make sure we get it. And then also we want to make sure that those beginning fabrics are lined up. Okay, we're going to start in at the end of the... We're going to line up the edge of the fabric with that seam guide, and we're going to come on down to the first seam. And I'm checking to make sure we're lined up, and we are lined up. We're going to take out the first pin right as we cross that seam. And we want to check again to make sure our fabrics are lined up for the next square. We'll sew down about half the way, and then we'll check our seam again. This one we need to make sure the fabric is laying in the right direction. Our seams are lined up. And so far so good. We're going to keep going. Seams are still lined up. We're still at 1/4 inch. We're coming up against that pin, so you want to take it out before it starts pulling on it. Checking our seams again. Pull out that pin. We're going over the junction there. And then in that last square, we're going to make sure our fabrics are lined up. Edge to edge, end to end. And we've sewn through. Now, I'll tell you, this is probably the most difficult part of this entire quilt, because you've got a bunch of seams. You've got seams, sometimes you've got 2 seams coming together where 2 other seams come together. So you need to take your time and just carefully do it. It's time-wise, it's more economical to slow down and get it right the first time than to have to rip it out and sew it again. And this did amazingly well. Let me do a little finger pressing there. I'm impressed with my own work. Do we have it there? We do. You'll notice that our point came together here at our seam, seams together, seams together, seams and point together. Now, they are, like this one is off like 2 threads. Something that by the time this is finished, you're never even going to see. So in this case, I'm very happy with this, and I'll move on to the next one. And for that next one, let's put these out the way. Here's what we need. We need this strip, and that strip is not that one. This one's going to be over here. And it's going to be this one. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to turn this over, right sides together, and we're going to pin this in place. I usually start here towards the middle. And then go to the other side. And work our way. Those seams coming together like that does not happen always, and you'll have to look at the individual area and see if it's something you're happy with. Generally speaking, once you quilt it, you're not going to see any very small discrepancies. You're going to see the big ones. You're going to see the ones where the points are cut off significantly, but the little ones you're not going to see. And there's a lot of sayings out there about riding a horse at 20 miles an hour, 20 feet away, and crazy stuff like that. But I think you have to be the judge of what you're content with. Let's adjust that one just a little bit. Okay. And see, we've got a little bit of extra fabric here in this one. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to let it extend over just maybe a 32nd of an inch, and then we'll ease the rest of that in. It looks like on that one end it got a little bit longer. And the same thing down here. Let's do that as well. We're going to bring that out just a smidgen, so they say. Okay, let's sew it. That we've tacked the end of that piece, and remember it's just a bit longer, so we're going to give it just a little pull, just a light pull. If you pull too much, some of those areas are on bias and they're going to pull way out of whack, and then when you lay it down, it's not going to lay down flat, it's going to have a pucker. Now sometimes you can work that pucker out when you're quilting, sometimes you can't, so just be aware of that. Taking out the pin. We didn't check that junction. We're definitely going to check this one. And if it needs a little micro adjustment, now is the time to do that. It's much easier while you're sewing than after those stitches are in. And sometimes the more you handle these pieces, the more finessing you're going to have to do when you sew. And I really need a stiletto here, but we're going to use this ripper. Take that pin out. And then we're just going to kind of ease that last little bit of seam. I'm not knotting these at the end. We're going to fairly quickly sew them together into, we're sewing them into the blocks now, but we'll sew them into the quilt top here shortly. Now let's see what we got this time. And when these strips go in and they're multicolor, you're just going to have to decide which one is the best way to press these. There's a little bulk right there. Okay, so this is the one we just did. We're just a smidgen off there, and I do mean just a smidgen, just a tad. But we are close enough that I think we are doing just great. And when I hold it up for you to see like this, you can't see those tiny little discrepancies. And that's the whole goal. If this is hanging on a wall if it's laying on a bed, or even if you are wrapped up in it, you're not going to care about the many discrepancies. I just want to make you aware of them so that you sew carefully. Okay, so now we've got 3 strips together. We're on to our last 2. And here's our last 2. We're going to sew this one on like this. It's the same technique. And what I'm going to do for this is the same thing I did a moment ago. We're going to meet up those seams. Pin them in place. Now here, they got pressed just a little bit off, so we're going to pull that back. If we left it down, it would be bulky where those seams meet, and we don't want that. And I will tell you that I have found too that when I start doing this, the first couple of blocks I put together are extremely accurate, and by the time I get to the 12th or 14th or 20th block, I'm getting a little tired, and sometimes they don't come together quite as nicely. So if you need to take a break or you need to step away from it for a couple of days, that is the way to go. And I'm going to go ahead and pin both sides on while we're here, so then we can just do the 2 seams and you'll see the whole block. It's exciting, isn't it? You've done this work on it, and you get to the point where it's truly all coming together, and it's exciting. You're getting all jazzed about the final product, and you can really see the result of your work at this point. Oops, I pinned my skin in there. Yikes. Some of these little intersections are going to be a little bulky because you've got 4 layers of fabric. Okay, so we've got this pinned, we've got this pinned, and a little sneak peek there. So we're going to sew these 2 seams, and then we should be able to open it up, and I'll let you see what it looks like sewn together, and then we'll take just a snippet of a flash and I'll iron them and come back and show you the complete thing. On these you need to make sure, because you're sewing 2 strips together, where did my little piece go? Here it is, that both strips have seams already in them, so you may have seams going in both directions. So you just want to be mindful of where a seam on the bottom may be. And I think because of that, we're going to start on this side. And we'll just need to watch here and here for seams that are traveling in the other direction. That'll give us the best visibility. So here we go. And we're still checking as we go to keep those lined up as best as we can. I can't tell if that one is on the mark or off, but we'll find out. I think they're pretty well matching up. But the more things you have to match, the more difficult it's going to be. You want to make sure when you get to the end that not only is that side area matched up, but the bottom is matched up too. If it's a little bit off, that's fine, but make sure that the whole piece of fabric across is matched. Okay, so we've got that one together. clip off our little leader here. And while we're talking about leaders real quick, while I do this next piece, the leader is helpful because it keeps you from getting a bird's nest. But a leader is also helpful in maybe if you want to work on several projects at the same time. Those leader pieces, instead of just sewing over a piece of fabric like I'm doing right now, you could actually use that leader to sew together pieces for another project. Especially if you have like a scrappy project, I see them used most for. Sorry, let me check this one real quick. I've got a little bit of play there. Got a little bit of play in this one too. And I just use my either a stiletto or a seam ripper to keep that fabric on top moving in so it doesn't drag on that piece and give you a what we call it, a ruffle or a fold, a gather in your fabric. I think I'm going to have to get me a stiletto. I don't have one of those. Okay, let's see how we did. Very well indeed. Okay, so let's check it real quick. This is the whole block. We've got the areas up top that we've allowed for seam allowances. And this side we're good, this side we're good, and that side we're good. So we shouldn't lose any points. That's a real plus. And it looks like we've done a great job of getting our seams together. I'm very pleased. Nothing jumps out at you that it's out of whack. There we go. Now, give me just a second. I'm going to press this and we'll finish up, and I'll give you some pointers and some ideas of where we go from here. How I have chose to press this is I press the outside blocks in, and then I press the center block out. So I've got my seams going this way, and then this seam going this way, and the same way on this side. The reason I chose to do that is because when you look at this, you're always going to look at this center block. So I wanted all of the blocks around it to be as free from underlying fabric. In other words, being able to see the seam underneath. I wanted it to be as free of that as I possibly could have. So that's why I chose to do it that way. And then the ones on the outside, pushing them in made more of the blue fabric fall underneath blue fabric than blue fabric under white fabric. I only had that here, and the rest of the places it's blue under blue. So that was also less shadowing underneath. So let's remove all these strips. I think you understand how it goes together. And there is our busy block. And it's all ready now to be checkerboarded with the other block. So when they go together, here's the way they're going to look. So we finished the plain block in an earlier video, and today we finished the busy block, and they're ready to be put together. Remember, you need, and I'm counting my blocks over there, 13 of the busy blocks and 12 of the plain blocks. And if you decide to go ahead and sew them together, great for you. Otherwise, we'll join together and sew some of these together and maybe show what it's going to look like as it begins to get size. Even I think just 4 or 6 blocks sewn together is really going to give you an impact of what this design looks like. So I hope you've enjoyed our video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. And if you like what you're seeing on our videos and you'd like to see more, be sure to subscribe. That's how we get more subscribers, we get more impact and visibility to our channel, and we're able to do more. I want to thank you for joining us, and if you've got a comment, if there's something you've learned from this that was helpful, please be sure to add those comments. I really enjoy seeing them, and if you've got an idea of how it could be done better, give us that idea. We enjoy that because there's not always one way to do anything. There's always many ways that you can accomplish the same thing with quilting and with life. So share. We all like to get that information if you'd like to. So we'll see you next time here at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Be sure to catch out our other videos. Be sure to catch the playlist on this project in case you've missed any of the videos. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.